Hello there and welcome. In this episode, we're going to continue working on the construction system. I'm sorry if I sound a bit off. I have a cold, but I don't want this to prevent me from recording new episodes. So, before we continue with the construction system, I just want to mention something that one of you brought up in the comment section. If, for example, we take our unit and we try to create some kind of enemy, so let's duplicate it and let's rename it to be enemy. And just so we don't save it by mistake, we're going to unpack it from being a prefab, and we're also going to make it attackable, only this first object, and we're also going to make it an enemy. Now we can move it over here. So this is our enemy. Of course, this is just a basic way to create an enemy. Obviously, we need to do many more adjustments, but we're going to deal with that in the future. But I just want to show you something. Let's say this is an enemy, and for now we are dealing with attacking and with following, but there is one small problem. If I run the game and I command my unit to attack this one, it's going to start attacking it as it should. But if we're just getting closer and the unit will be in the same area as the enemy, it will not follow it and start attacking it, although we do have this functionality. And the reason is because in order for the on-trigger event to happen, one of our units has to have a rigid body, and this is just the way Unity works. And as we know, our unit is not using a rigid body because we're not using physics, we're using our nav mesh agents to move the units. So you will have to add a rigid body to one of them. If you don't want this on your units, you can add it to the enemies, but let's just add the rigid body over here. And of course, we want to disable it from actually being a rigid body, so we're going to disable gravity, we're going to make it kinematic, and we can also freeze the rotation so nothing weird will happen. So we basically disable the main functionalities of the rigid body, but we still need it in order for the on-trigger to happen. And now we can see that the unit starts following immediately because he's inside of this trigger zone. If we move it a bit further and we enable the gizmos, we can see this yellow area. So this is the detection zone. So if the unit goes closer and closer, he will be triggered and he will start following the enemy and attack it. So this is a solution. And of course, we're going to do many more fine tunings. So don't worry if something is not working. And also know that it's not possible for us to actually cover every single scenario in this tutorial. So you will have to do your own work and polish your game so it will actually work very good and it will feel good and it will do all the things that you want to do. And also, if you still don't know, you can become a member of this channel. It will give you access to our Discord server, and over there you will have a community of people that are members. And of course, you will be answered much faster either by me or by other people, so you can get help, ask questions, you can share your work. This is something that is very hard to do in the comment section. So now let's just delete the enemy. And we can remove the gizmos and we can continue with the construction system. What's special about this episode is that we're finally going to add some graphics into the game. So before we add models for our buildings, we also want to create some kind of terrain. And the way we're going to do it is by simply clicking on the terrain and using our paint terrain tool. So we can click over here and then select the paint texture. For this, we need to add some kind of assets for the terrain. So I'm going to show you where you can download these textures. Of course, you can use any other asset that you like. In the description, I'm going to provide a link to this website. It's a very cool place to find free textures and models and HDRIs. So we're simply going to click on Browse Textures, and over here you can find a lot of textures. They are all free to download, and you need to check the actual license if you can use it, but you can see that there's so many options, I'm going to use some kind of desert material. So this is the texture that I'm going to use. I want some kind of desert environment, this mud crack dry. I'm just going to click on it, and over here we can see how it looks. So it has a very natural, very realistic look. Of course, it comes with a normal map, so you can have this 3D style, and it's not just going to be flat. And over here you can download different versions, but if you click on download, it will download the 4K version. The other one that I'm going to use is this dirt floor, so I'm going to click on it. And it's very nice that they offer you similar assets, so if you want to mix and match and you want to blend different kinds of textures, so they offer it over here. So I have this dirt floor, and I'm going to download this. So you're going to see your zipped files, you're going to extract them, and then you're going to take both of these folders and drag them into the project. You're going to get this warning that the normal map is not actually a normal map, so you need to fix this. And now you're going to find both of them over here. Let's just select them and drag them into the UI or into some kind of graphics folder. And inside we can find the different textures. Now we want to paint this texture on our actual terrain. So we're going to select the terrain, we're going to select this paint terrain, and we're going to make sure it stands on paint texture. Now we need to add a new terrain layer. So we're going to click over here, create layer. So I found it over here. I'm going to select the one with the actual color. So we can see that it automatically set it on our entire terrain. Of course, we can also just paint it, but for now, this will be our main texture. That's why it's okay, and we can always paint other textures on top of this. Now we can see it over here. We can click on the actual layer, and we can add the normal map. We can also play around with the tiling. I don't like this one because it's a bit stretched, so I'm going to reduce it to 1:1, and you can see that now it looks much better. And I'm going to add the normal map, so I'm going to click over here, and I'm going to select the normal map. It's this purple one. And now if we zoom in, we can see that the cracks are actually visible because the normal map gives it this 3D kind of feeling. And if we increase the scale, you can see that it gets even more 3D. And if we set it to 0, it will be a flat texture. So I like to keep it at 1, or maybe even remove it at all. It really depends on the style. This is like a nice desert, but if you want to make it a bit more realistic, you can increase it to 1. I'm going to leave it at 1. Now you can keep adding textures if you have some kind of snowy area. So just add another layer, create layer. I'm going to use the second one, this dirt floor. I'm going to click on it, add the normal. I'm going to reduce the tiling as well. And now we can select any kind of brush that we want. We can set the size, and now we can paint this texture. Of course, you can use it for roads, and you can have many other kinds of terrain layers. But I'm going to just remove all of this for now. And I'm going to use only this first terrain. So now that we're done with the terrain, of course, we can start adding different models. For example, mountains and rocks and different trees and things like that. Maybe just different objects in the environment, but we're going to deal with that later. For now, we want to continue with the construction system. So as we know, we have a very primitive placeholder for the building. It's this cube. Everything is working, but it doesn't look good, so we want to add our first model. Now, although I'm using different models for the unit and for other things, I want to provide to you a very large pack of models for this tutorial. So you will be able to follow along, so you have some kind of placeholder, and then of course you can use your own assets if you want to create your final game. So you're going to find a link to this website. This is a website for different mods that people use to change the way their game looks like and maybe create other versions of the game. So you can download this entire package of models. So you're simply going to download this and import it into your project. So I have it inside imports, generals, and I have different folders over here. And of course, you don't even have to use it. This is just if you want to follow along and you want to have some kind of placeholders for now until you buy other models or get other models. So inside this package we can find a lot of different things, but we are interested in our first building. So I'm going to enter into the European structures ES command, and this will be this command center model. So this will be our first building. Now we can find an FBX over here and we can drag it into the scene, but as we see it's huge, so we're going to click on the FBX and we're going to change the scale factor, so model scale factor, and we're going to decrease it to 0.12 and we're going to click on apply. Now we can also see that it's rotated, so we're going to click on the prefab and rotate it to about 315. So it will face this way and it will also be in line with the cells. Next, we also want to add some kind of color, some textures on this model, but because this is not meant for Unity, there is not a lot to play around with. We also get this very basic texture, so we are going to do some kind of workaround. Of course, in your game you will have your own models and they will have materials with colors, but because this is just something for a placeholder, we need to find a solution for it. So I'm going to create a new material. I'm going to name it command center, and I'm going to drag it on the model. We actually don't want to drag it on the entire model. We want to expand the prefab and only drag it on the structure, because we have the structure, but we also have the glass. So we can actually give a different color or a different material for the glass, for the windows. So I'm going to drag it on this faction structure, and right now it will be white, but we can take this texture and drag it into this base map. So we're going to take this and we're going to drag it into the base map. So now it got some colors from this texture, but this is not a texture for actually creating a material for the model. So we need to play around with this. We can change the tiling a bit. So I'm just going to set some kind of value, 0.07 and 2.54, and this will give it this black and white style. So it took parts of this texture, and of course this is not going to look like this, but it still looks a bit cool, a bit futuristic. And again, this is just for our game, for the placeholder. You will not deal with this problem. Now this is just a model and we want to make it into the prefab that will be instantiated when we use the building system. So we're going to open our episode 11 assets and we're going to drag the house prefab into the scene. So now we can see that the house that we have is over here. We can also position it in the middle of the cell just to see what it looks like when we're going to position it with the construction system. And now we're going to take this entire command center and place it as a child of this house. We also want to position it in the middle of the cell, so the same way the mesh is in this position, 0.5, 0.5, we want to do it for the command center, so 0.5, 0.5, but for the Y we can keep it at 0 because we don't want it to go and float over the ground. Now if we disable the command center, we can see that this mesh takes exactly one cell, but the command center is taking 9 cells, right? And we can also go to the database and see that our house is taking 1 cell, right? And this is something that is being used by the construction system when we want to create another building and we don't want them to overlap. So it's important to update this according to our model. So for now, the model will be 3 cells on 3 cells. So we can go to the database and change this to 3 on 3, and we can also rename it to be command center. Now we can remove this mesh, but let's not forget that we have this mesh obstacle. So we also want to add it on the command center, but we're going to do it on the faction structure as well. So we add this nav mesh obstacle. And now we can finally delete this primitive cube, and we have our new model. It will also be in the exact center of our entire house. Let's also rename the house to be Command Center. And now we can also save this entire prefab, and we can drag it over here to create an original prefab. Now we can delete this house, and inside of our database we need to replace the prefab for the new prefab. So we're going to drag the command center over here into this slot. Now we can delete this from the scene, and it should work the same way it worked with the house. Of course, something I forgot, just open the prefab, click on the faction structure, and disable the obstacle at the beginning. This will be enabled only when we construct the model. Of course, another thing you can do is add a material to the glass. So we can create another material. We can drag it on the glass, and then we can change the color to be maybe red or green or maybe blue. Then we can also add some kind of emission to it. So we can enable the emission, give it this blue color, and increase the intensity to, let's say, 2. So you can give the windows a different material if you want. And now when we want to construct this building, we are going to see the new preview of the new model. And when we place it, we can see the new model. We can also see the emission. Now again, you can play around with the colors, but now it works with the new model. And it looks kind of nice, especially with this made up futuristic color. Now, if we try to build another building on top of this one, we're going to get this red warning, this red preview. And even if we're not building on top of it, we cannot build it over here because these cells are still a part of this building. So this will prevent overlappings, and it means that the system is working. Because this model also has 9 cells, right? So we cannot place them on top of the cells of the other. Another thing is that for now, it's red when the building is not available, but it's white when it's available. So we want to change this color to be green. Inside our preview system, we're going to scroll down over here to this apply feedback to preview method. And instead of making the color white when it's not valid, we're going to change it to green, and also over here in this method. So now it's going to be green when it's valid, but red when it's not valid. And I want to also add emission to the actual preview, but because we are not going to be able to do it on the material itself, because we need to set a color for the emission, and we don't really know what is the color in real time, right? It can be red, it can be green, so we cannot set it on the actual material. We need to set it inside of the code. So over here, let's add a few lines of code. So over here, we're basically enabling the emission for this material, and over here, we're setting the intensity. So we're taking the color that we have over here, and this can be green, it can be red, we don't know. We take the color and we multiply it by the intensity. So if you want the intensity to be higher, just increase it to 2 or even higher, but we're going to stick with 1. It will still be rather intense. And then we're simply going to set the final color to be the color of the emission. So basically the same thing we did over here, we're going to do it on this transparent ghost material, right? We're going to enable the emission and set the intensity, but because we don't know the color, we cannot set it over here. We need to do it from the script. So now we can build and we can see this green preview. We can also see that it has this emissive material. Then when we build it, we can see our actual model. And if we try to build on top of it, we can see this red preview, and it also has this emissive material, and it actually looks kind of cool. So now we can build more buildings and we can add more models for different types of buildings. In the next episode, we're going to add the actual UI to build buildings, and then we're going to add a few more types of buildings so you can see how we create different buildings inside of the database. But it's rather simple. You just add another object, you give it a different name, a different ID, the actual cell size, and the prefab. Of course, we also need to create some kind of conditioning for the building, so only if we have enough resources, and we also want to gray out the building when we don't have enough resources. So all of this we're going to do inside of this UI that we will have over here. So that's all for this episode. Please subscribe if you're still not subscribed. Please leave a like. If you want to support me, you can become a member, and I'll see you next time.